Massachusetts. But our primary, our main focus, the way that we do that is we're a watchdog organization. We track the state house, we track what they do, and we focus on strengthening grassroots advocacy through workshops like this one. And we endorse candidates, which we heard a little bit about our endorsement committee from the intros, and we'll hear a little bit more later on. But yeah, the focus today is these information forums and the workshops that everyone chose to spend their Monday night, Tuesday night attending. So what is the State House? How does it function? Why is it important? Let's get into that. So the state government has a lot of powers. I know it's very easy to focus just on the federal government with all of the many things that are happening in the federal government, but it is important to focus on the state government. It manages our education system. It controls our local police forces. There's $63 billion of spending this year. So that's a lot of tax money that can go to good programs that focusing on the state government can levy good things happening. And with the federal government doing so many bad things, a great way to push back is pushing our state government to push back on it. The states often function as laboratories of democracy. Massachusetts is a great example of that. Obamacare is currently federal policy, and that started as a state policy here in Massachusetts. So to bring about federal change, focusing on the state government is a great way to do so. The way the state government functions here in Massachusetts is very similar to the way that the federal government functions. In the federal government, you've got a president, we've got a Senate, and we have a House. It's the same in the state government, but a little different. We have a governor who has roles very similar to that of the president, 4-year terms, executive, and then our legislative body is also bicameral. We have a state senate and a state representative. So Massachusetts is split into 40 districts by population, and each district elects a state senator. This here is mine, Barry Feingold. And Massachusetts is split into 160 districts of equal population, and each one elects a state representative.
I don't think about the order. I mean, it'd be nice.
The president and the governor have very similar roles. The executive, they sign bills into law. They can veto bills. Those vetoes can be overturned. They implement the programs, and they have 4-year terms. And similarly, our legislative branch in the federal and state governments are very similar. They pass laws, and it's bicameral, so something only comes into law if both chambers pass it. The folks on the state government are often referred to as just Beacon Hill. So you may hear Capitol Hill being everyone who works in DC and an elected official. It's the same here in Massachusetts. We just call it Beacon Hill. That's the neighborhood that they all work in. So let's talking about how a bill becomes a law on Beacon Hill. It's, again, similar to the process that you're familiar with in the federal government in terms of, at least this is how it's supposed to work. A representative files a bill, there's a committee hearing, the committee votes on it, and then there are floor votes in the House and Senate. And if they both pass, a majority in both chambers pass it, then it can go to the governor's desk where she can sign it into law. This is sort of how it's supposed to work, but there's a little bit more of a complicated process here in Massachusetts that can lead to problems. So after the bill's been filed, there's a joint committee hearing. The most important process where bills live and die, usually die in Massachusetts, is in the Ways and Means Committees. So it has to go through the House Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And a bill can die in either of those committees, and then it doesn't make it to a floor vote. So very often, these committee processes that happen in the State House are much more important than the floor votes. And a lot of times we don't see bills because they died in committee and we don't know who voted on them how. If a bill passes through both committees, passes through the floor debate in both chambers, usually the chambers will have passed slightly different versions of the bill because of the amendment processes that they each have. And if so, then the bill goes to a conference committee, which is just 6 people. It's just the leadership of each chambers. They choose, what the final language of the bill will be. And after they do so, there's no more amending it. And that conference committee is completely private. So this is often a place where progressive, good amendments that got added onto a bill get taken off, and who knows who to blame. We can't primary them, we can't confront them because we don't know whose fault it is. And then, of course, the governor finally will sign the bill if it gets through that entire process, or veto it. There's a lot of jargon that I'm going to use throughout the slideshow, so I'm going to get it out of the way right now. The legislative session is the time frame when the legislature operates. It's 2 years here in Massachusetts. So the 194th session started in 2025, and they remain in formal sessions until July 31st, which is considered the end of session or the end of formal sessions. And then they're in informal sessions up until New Year's Eve. Historically, very little is supposed to, in theory, happen in informal sessions. You're supposed to finish the job by the end of formal sessions, and informal sessions are for emergencies. But it's becoming more and more common for legislating to happen in informal sessions. There's no more recorded votes during informal sessions, which means any legislator could, speak out and stop a bill from passing because they can't go to a roll call vote. So it's very interesting that they're starting to do more and more legislation in informal sessions, and the rules have kind of changed around informal sessions this year, but we're not sure how that's going to play out. So we'll know pretty soon. It is very important, though, to pass things at the state government. We've seen a lot of inactivity here in Massachusetts, despite a lot of change happening at the federal government that we should be responding to. You can see a lot of recent headlines. There's been ICE detentions. There have been bans on gender-affirming care. And yet, despite all of this, we're the only we're the only blue state that has contracts with ICE for our police to operate with them. So despite all of the insanity happening at the federal government, almost nothing passes through the Massachusetts state government. You can see all the bills passed in 2025 here in this pie chart, and the vast majority of them are pertaining to just a single city or town. Those are usually home rule petitions that make it through, and that's good. We want home rule petitions to make it through, but you don't give them credit for passing a bill there. A lot of them pertain to a single state employee, or they're an awareness day. Bills that actually change something, statewide policy changes in 2025, there were only 6. That's a small number. That's very small. So despite the fact that Massachusetts is such a blue state, we're heralded as a beacon for political action, we should be leading the country in a lot of issues. But because our state house delays and kills and is so unproductive, we're not able to be what we should be able to. We're not able to meet our potential. Bills that are part of the Democratic Party platform aren't able to pass, despite the fact that we have a Democratic governor and super majorities in both chambers for Democrats. Here's a lot of great bills that have been bouncing around, not passing for years and years. Same-day voter registration that has been being pushed for since 2007. It's passed in the Senate. It has never passed the House in all that time. You will be able to vote on same-day voter registration this November because it's finally going to the ballot in a ballot initiative. And there's tons of other ones that we've been pushing, and other progressive organizations have been pushing, and they're popular, but they just can't pass through this incredibly unproductive legislature. So clearly there's a problem. Let's talk about what it is. What are the structural causes for what's going on here? A lot of the breakdown happens in the committee votes. Committees have 3 options when they consider a bill. They can report it out favorably, they can report it out unfavorably, or they can send it to study. And they almost never report it out unfavorably. The polite way that they like to kill bills is send it to study. Tons and tons of good bills get sent to study, and study is meaningless. There are no studies. They don't do a study. They don't have a report. There's no meeting for a study. They really don't live up to the pretense of pretending that this is considering the bill more. It is just the polite way of killing the bill. State democracy, legislators should have to respond to the needs of their voters so that you can make change happen by talking to your legislator. But because legislators often vote behind closed doors in committees, and because there's so leadership, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President have so much power and can put so much pressure on representatives, the people pressuring them that influence their votes are much more often leadership who are influenced by lots of PAC groups and corporations instead of being their own constituents. So we have identified, we've grouped the problems in the Massachusetts State House into 2 major groups. The first one being lack of transparency. Without transparency, voters can't hold you accountable. And the second one being concentration of power, the pressure that leadership can put on representatives. For lack of transparency, it's important to note that we understand that corporations and private interests are going to be influencing legislators. There's not much we can do directly about that, but it should be that as a representative, you have to pick a side. Either you're making the corporations happy or you're making people happy. But when we don't know how you voted, you can keep the corporations happy by voting the way they say, and then tell your constituents you did the opposite. And now there's no way to confront that corporate influence directly. And so that is why lack of transparency is such a huge issue. We can't hold representatives accountable because we don't know who killed bills. For many, many, many years, House committees and joint committees didn't make their votes public. So you couldn't see how a committee, when a committee voted down a bill, you couldn't see which representatives voted down a bill. And there were cases where a majority of representatives on a committee said that they voted yes on a bill, said that they voted to report it out favorably, but it got sent to study. So mathematically, someone's lying. And then when votes go to the floor, the vast majority of them aren't roll call votes. So we don't know, even on a floor vote, we usually don't know who let the bill pass and who voted against it. Because of some really great organizing from Act on Mass, this session, the House and Senate finally agreed to have joint rules for the first time in 6 years. And for the first time ever, we will have public committee votes in theory in the rules across both chambers. So until last year, constituents were not able to see how the representatives voted. And those we'll get into the loopholes and ways that they get around that later. But outside of secret votes, the legislature is exempted from public records law. They exempted themselves from public records law and open meeting law. We're the only state in the country where both the legislature and the governor's office are exempted from public records law. Written testimony in favor of or against a bill, we don't get to see it. I will note there's another great ballot initiative this November. We will get to vote on removing the exemption for the legislature on public records law. But until that happens, and hopefully it does, and hopefully they comply with it, the legislature is exempted from public records law. And finally, representatives get no time to read bills. So bills are often sent through, they're made public, and 24 hours later, they're passed through the chamber. That means that there's no time for representatives to read it. They could be lied to by leadership about what's in it. It also means no time for advocacy groups to read it. We should be able to read the bill, call up our members, and tell them to call their representatives. It should be a deliberative process that constituents are able to play a role in. Constituents can't, with less than 24 hours, read a whole bill, tell their neighbors to call their reps. Having such a quick process means locking out constituents from that process. And I'm not the only one saying this. It's not just Act on Mass claiming that we are a non-transparent legislature. Lots of organizations have given us really bad rankings. We've been ranked last. We've been giving Fs. And the Society of Professional Journalists every year gives out what they call the Black Hole Award to one institution, not necessarily a legislature, that is the least transparent every year. And in 2026, so happy to have received it. A great award for Massachusetts. We received that the Massachusetts legislature received that least transparent institution award. So that's something good. We've won something. But, we do finally have those joint rules. We finally have something positive. Lots of great rules came in through the joint rules that came in. The one I've already noted is that joint committees and House committees will now finally have to make their votes public. We'll also have to get plain language summaries of bills. Conference committee meetings are supposed to be held publicly now. And there's when the conference committee, those 6 people get to decide the final language of a bill, they have to give at least 24 hours before the chambers vote on the final language of the bill. And a joint committee hearing, they have to give 10 days notice before holding it. So you can call people and get them to go testify. However, I've got a fun question for everyone. Of these 5 great rules that we organized for, how many of them do you think were followed by all committees all the time? Anyone have a guess? You can throw it in the chat. Yeah, most people are right. It's 0. None of them were followed consistently, and we'll talk about how. They use loopholes and they use non-compliance. Now, there's a great website that a volunteer made called beaconhilltracker.org where you can look into the details of which committees are breaking rules when. You can see the most common rule that was violated was the requirement to post public votes. Over 2,000 times was no vote were no votes posted, and you can see which committees are the biggest offenders. The Judiciary Committee is a far and away biggest offender of not having public votes. Sometimes they do just brazenly break a rule without finding a loophole, but there's also a loophole that they like to use. In the joint rules, which require public committee votes, bills are also given a deadline. And if the committee doesn't take a vote, yes, no, or study on a bill before that deadline, then it's considered timed out and they don't have to hold a vote on it. So one bill that Act on Mass has advocated for is the State House Staff Union bill. State House staffers want to unionize, and the union hasn't been recognized. The legislature says they're not allowed to. And there's a bill that would allow them to. And the committee that was considering it didn't want to vote no on it because then we could hold them accountable for that. So instead, they let the issue time out. They just waited for the deadline to be reached. And now the bill can't pass, it's killed, but no one voted no on it publicly. So it's the same issue, just done through a slightly different maneuver. So that's the lack of transparency issue. The other one is concentration of power, how much power leadership has. A great question for this one. Of the just the Democratic representatives in the House, how many of them do you think vote with the Speaker, the leader of the House, 100% of the time? You can throw your answers in the chat again. I think people will get it right. Yeah, 85% of them, their votes line up with the Speaker's every single time. So either they all just happen to agree with Ron from Quincy, or they are taking their cues from leadership on how to vote. So here's the breakdown of the way that power works in the State House. There's the Speaker, Ron Mariano. He chooses leadership positions. He picks committee chairs. Often in other legislatures, committee chairs are elected by the committee. Not here. Committee chairs here are chosen by the Speaker. He decides which bills come to the floor, and he controls the amendment process. He's also not term limited. The Speaker used to be a term limited position. It's not anymore. The Senate President also gets to choose leadership positions and committee chairs. That's also not voted on. She also gets Senate President Spilka also gets to decide which bills come to the floor and controls the amendment process. And similarly, the Senate President used to be a term limited position, but as she was reaching her term limit, the Senate got rid of term limits. Below the Speaker, just below, we have the party leaders, Mike Moran, who we'll hear a little bit more about as well. They work with the Speaker, and they often whip votes for the Speaker. And then we have committee chairs. The most powerful committee being the Ways and Means Committee. Aaron Michlitz is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. But committee chairs get to decide which bills are voted on in committee. So if you want to kill a bill by letting the deadline pass, the committee chair can do so. And they get a lot of power over which bills are reported out of committee. What's also, and then the rank and file representatives, of which there are fewer and fewer, they get no privileges. All they can do is co-sponsor, file bills, and vote on bills. What's significant about this hierarchy and the structure is that it influences where you are in it, influences how much you make. Rank and file representatives make just a little over $80,000, while that pay can be doubled or more than doubled by getting promotions to higher positions. And as I mentioned, those higher positions are chosen by the Senate President and by the Speaker. And that is not used innocently. If you're a rank and file representative and you don't receive any sort of leadership position that gives you a stipend, your income is less than the Boston median income. And ex-representatives have said that they were told that if they don't vote the right way, they will lose their committee chairmanship and with it their stipend, their additional pay. Lawmakers, it's not just a threat. There have been times where people have been demoted. They've lost their stipends, not even for a vote they took, but for making a comment to the press that the Speaker didn't like. And it's not just a small number of people in committee chairs that get this money, because a majority of both chambers, a super majority of both chambers receive stipends. And a lot of these stipended positions, a lot of these committee chairmanships are for committees that don't consider bills. They've never had a meeting. They've never had a hearing. So they don't do anything additional. These aren't real positions that they're receiving stipends for. They exist exclusively So these committees exist exclusively so that there can be chairs and vice chairs who get additional money. It's loyalty pay, and these are ghost committees. Former state representative Diane Provost also spoke out about this and said that if you voted against the speaker, you got demotions, which lost your stipend. You also got less desirable committee assignments and downgrades in office space. So they're treating you poorly outside of just cutting your pay if you vote against the speaker. You are getting treated terribly if you vote against the speaker, and they can hurt you bad. And this money, it works. The speaker gets his money's worth for sure. There's a very damning example. I love this video wherein representatives were caught voting just the way the speaker tells them to. I'll play it right now, and I'll commentate it as it goes.
Roll call is now open. Court officers notify the members that a roll call is in progress and will remain open for 3 minutes.
So this was a vote in 2019, and you'll see Speaker DeLeo's, it'll cut to the votes right now, and Speaker DeLeo at the time will have his light go red right there. So that means that he's voted no, and all of a sudden everyone else votes no. The board lights up no. But there's confusion.
Yes. Mikey.
He covers the mic. We can't hear this part. But the speaker accidentally voted no, and now everyone's being told, switch your vote to yes, switch them, Mikey. And all of a sudden, everyone's vote starts to light up green. So either some very persuasive arguments were made in that 55-second period, or they just saw how the speaker voted and followed it, and then were told that it was wrong and followed it again. And we'll skip. There's some silence for a while.
Roll call is now open.
I'll skip us ahead to the end where you can see the final vote. Remember, a minute ago,
all members voted who wish to do so. Time for voting has expired. The clerk will display the tally. 157 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative.
When they saw the speaker had voted no, everyone's vote lighted up red. But at the end, after they were told that was wrong, not a single person ended up voting no. So it is extraordinarily blatant what happened there. They voted the way that they were told to by the speaker, the way that the speaker had voted. They didn't even wait to ask what it was. They just saw how he voted and voted the same way.
Roll call is now. Roll call.
And these are some of those previous reps earlier who have blown the whistle on this. That the House is just the fiefdom of the speaker. Everyone just does what they say. And let's look at what that causes in terms of legislation that passes in climate legislation. Hang on, let me get it to full screen again. Sorry about this. So we're going to look at a really damning study done by some really smart folks at Brown about what type of climate legislation passes and what doesn't. One of their key findings was that the reason that so little good climate legislation passes is because of non-public votes and because of committee membership being decided by leadership. So it's not just us saying so, Brown says so as well. And there's this really great graphic that once this loads, that you'll see that this Brown study produced. It's a little complicated, so I'm going to walk you through it. Right here, coming from this initial gray bar, are all the bills, all the climate bills that were introduced in 2018. The ones that are colored in red are the ones that the utility lobby opposed, and the ones colored in green are the ones that the utility lobby supported. The ones that went through this gray bar went through the TUE committee, the Transportation, Utility, Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee. And as you can see, most of the bills that went into this committee did not come out. They died in committee, but the ones that did get out, overwhelmingly green. So somehow in that committee, the utilities lobby always gets their way. Now, the climate bills that went through other committees, it's a little more of a mixed bag. The utilities lobby didn't seem to have too much control there. But before they can get to a vote, they still have to make it through both Ways and Means committees. And as you can see through all these lines, every time it goes through one of these committees, the bills that remain get a lot smaller and get a lot greener, meaning that the utilities lobby is getting their way in these committees. And through this process, behind closed doors, the bills that made it all the way through and got signed, almost entirely green and very, very few. So if you want climate bills to get passed, you either need to get the utilities lobby to back them, which they're not going to, or we need to change the committee structure in the State House. So our key takeaways, the leadership is able to exercise a lot of power in committee votes, and leadership is able to control what comes to a vote. And when things come to a floor vote, they're almost always not recorded, and I'll talk about why. If you want a floor vote to be recorded so that it's public, everyone knows how their legislator voted, you have 15 seconds from when the speaker starts it, and you need 10% of the body to stand up physically. So you need 16 people to stand for a roll call vote. If the speaker doesn't want a roll call vote, we saw how much pressure was put on how much representatives get in line. So unless 16 people stand up and force them to have a roll call vote, they can vote and no one knows who voted how. And that means that there's no accountability. People can claim they supported one thing and didn't. People can play constituents and lobbyists off each other, and people can just get reelected over and over again without any substantive policy debate happening in their district. That's bad for democracy. Are there any questions about any of that so far? And also, you can put questions in the chat and Scotia will answer them if that hasn't already been done. Okay, I'm going to move on. Let's talk about the state budget. How the money gets spent. There's a long process. The governor submits a budget proposal, and then after the governor submits their budget proposal, the House Ways and Means Committee, the House Ways and Means leaders, so just a couple members of leadership, it's like 3 people, they get together and they come up with a proposal that they submit. And then it gets given to the House as a whole, who get to debate on it, submit amendment after amendment after amendment on it. And then a finalized House budget gets made and passed through the House. And then the Senate has to do the same thing. So their leaders get together, come up with a proposal. It goes to the body as a whole, who debate on it, pass amendments. And then the Senate passes one. And then because the Senate and House will have passed different budgets because of their various amendments and because their leadership likely will have produced different budget proposals, it has to go to a conference committee, again, just 6 people, members of leadership in the House and Senate, that decide the final budget before they send it back to the chambers to vote yes or no. And worthy of note that this year, that conference, as I highlighted earlier, that we finally got it in the rules that they have to wait 24 hours from the conference committee report, from the conference committee sending out a bill to the votes in both chambers. They didn't do that this year. They did not wait the 24 hours. So classic rule breaking. And that conference committee is really where the actual budget is made, and it's 6 people who are part of it, and it's private, and we don't know what goes on there. So that is a serious loss for democracy. But also, there's another part of the process in the House and Senate processes that can lead to bad transparency and simple lying. And that's another great way of killing popular bills, is through consolidating them away. So when an amendment gets proposed, many amendments get proposed, they could be voted up or down, but they're almost always combined, consolidated into a big consolidated amendment. So leadership makes these consolidated amendments. They say, here, we're putting all of these amendments into one big one, and they pick the language of the big one. And so it's supposed to save time, but it's done behind closed doors. And there's sort of an expectation that you're going to vote yes on all consolidated amendments. However, a lot of times leadership says that an amendment was included in the consolidated amendment, but when you read the language of that consolidated amendment, it's not actually there. So that's sort of similar to sending a bill to study, killing it without saying you're killing it. Consolidating an amendment away is a similar way of doing so, where you put the language in, you say you put the language in, you say it's being passed, but it didn't actually. And we have a graphic that can show an example of that. Let's say that there are 6 people proposed these 6 amendments, and this leadership says we're going to consolidate them into one big mega amendment. And you can see a lot of good things in there, or a lot of things in there. But what actually, that's what they say is in the consolidated amendment. But when you read the language, all it actually says is that there's more money for dog parks in the chair's district. So Amendment 2 and 5 made it in, and there's more money for the speaker's district. Amendment 4 made it in. The other 3, they got consolidated away. They said they were in the consolidated amendment. They weren't really. It was a way of killing the amendment that a rep proposed without anyone having to vote no on it, which could lead to people getting primaried or people having constituents call them angry. So they don't want to have to make reps vote no, so they just consolidate amendments away. Now, that's a great example. Here's what a real consolidated amendments first page looks like. This is a list of all of the amendments that were consolidated into one mega one in the budget this year. So each of these numbers is a separate amendment that's said to be included in this one, but the consolidated amendment is only 8 pages. And many of these amendments have none of their language in that consolidated amendment. So let's say you are part of an advocacy group that really, really supported Amendment 104. If you want to know if your amendment got included, you would have to go read through this 8-page document, searching for your language. Maybe they changed it. You can't just search it, just to maybe be disappointed that it didn't get included at all, and your legislators are blatantly lying to you. This year's budget, there's some good stuff and some bad stuff. You can read the good. They're finally putting the K-12 funding formula under review. There's some special ed reimbursements, but there's also some bad. The local aid increase that they put in this year was just not enough, and lots of municipalities have had to pass overrides recently, and it's going to get worse if local aid doesn't increase more. They cut a lot of caseworkers for the Department of Transitional Assistance. They do good work, and they're not going to be able to anymore. And they didn't. There's a formula fix, and there's a formula issue in local aid, and they opted not to fix it. They postponed that issue without immediate aid. If you care about any of these things, the good or the bad, you should get to know which legislators got the good stuff in there and didn't get got the bad stuff in there as well, so that you can either thank legislators, say thank you for doing this, or you can yell at them. But we just don't know because the process is in the conference committee and the consolidated amendments are also made behind closed doors. So the parts of the process that actually matter are all done behind closed doors. You don't get to yell at anyone or thank anyone or do anything that would mean participating in the process in any meaningful way. And neither do your neighbors. That, again, bad for democracy. A little bit more jargon. The supplemental budget. A supplemental budget is an additional budget that provides funding for a specific area that has funding shortfalls. The funding for it needs to already exist. The most common, example of this that was recent is the Fair Share Amendment that passed in 2022. It created a supplemental budget supposed to be used for education and transportation. And supplemental budgets being very often allow leadership to sort of tack on a policy very easily. It's a great thing that you can just tack something onto it and without a lot of oversight. And a great example of this is from that Fair Share supplemental budget meant for education and transportation. The speaker earmarked onto it a certain amount of money for one parking garage in his district. So how much do you think one parking garage costed? Anyone want to take a guess? Yeah.
25 million.
Yep, you're right. 25 million. So somehow we decided to spend $25 million on one parking garage in Quincy because the speaker decided that he wanted more money coming to his district. I don't know how you spend $25 million on a parking garage. So it's a lot of problems, but it's not all hopeless. We can fix this, and let's talk about what Act on Mass is doing to try to bring about that change. Good policy can protect us from the worst of federal overreach, but we can organize where we live. We can get our neighbors involved, and we can open the doors of the State House, despite all of the effort that's put to try to keep those doors closed and get us to focus our attention to the federal level, to the local level, to any of these things. We can open those doors and let people see what's going on in the state government. Act on Mass is getting involved in that in a couple ways. As the endorsement committee was talked about earlier, we've endorsed candidates for state legislative races, as we do every cycle, try to bring new blood in there who want to bring about real change. We put out a weekly newsletter, the Saturday Scoop. So we read through all the consolidated amendments, or some of them, and to tell you what's actually going on in the State House so that you can stay up to date and you can know what you can do to help. And we put together a pledge that representatives can sign with 5 parts of it. We'll talk about the details later. We'll talk about our endorsed candidates. We're very excited about these. We've endorsed 8 candidates running for the state legislature this year, 5 running for the State House, and 3 running for the State Senate. If you live near any of these districts, you could get involved, help out. If you receive the Saturday Scoop, we'll keep you updated on how to get involved. But yeah, and if you don't live in any of these districts, then or live near any of these districts, then we should talk about the pledge, which I will do so later. But first, if you don't already receive the Saturday Scoop, it is the best way to stay informed on Massachusetts politics, and it will help you stay informed on what you can do to help. So it's a great place to sign up. You can sign up at actonmass.org or at the QR code right here. It's great writing if you don't already. I imagine if you're on here, most of you already receive it. And finally, our pledge. We with a couple other organizations, with lots of other organizations, have put together the Every District Accountable Pledge. We're asking candidates for state legislative positions to make 5 commitments. All seem very obvious to me. If you co-sponsor a bill, you should vote for it. That's commitment 1. Why would you co-sponsor a bill to vote against it? You should hold at least 2 town halls a year in your district, so that you have to talk to your constituents, the people you represent. You should support legislation to provide public funding for elections, so that the corporate powers that donate don't have as much control. And we want reinstated term limits for the Speaker and the Senate President. That is obvious. We should have those, and we want people to commit to doing that as well. And finally, we have had experiences with pushing through ballot initiatives that don't get upheld, even though they're passed. In 2024, question 1, we worked on passing the audit. 72% of Massachusetts voters voted to approve the auditor's right to audit the legislature, but it hasn't been done yet. So we want them to commit to upholding not just that, but lots of ballot questions are happening this year, and we want a guarantee that legislators will uphold the will of voters on those. So you can, if any candidate running in your district, you should ask them, have they taken this pledge? They should take this pledge, because if everyone is able to do these things, we will have a much, much better, more functional state government. And these should be so obvious. So it's disappointing that it's as difficult as it is to get people to sign on to these. And next week, we have a great event in front of the state, on the steps of the state legislature, on the steps of the State House. We will be at the end of the session, July 31st. The end of the session is July 31st. So on the last day before that, on July 30th at 1 p.m., we're grading the State House. Lots of different organizations are showing up to give the State House a grade on a certain issue. Act on Mass will be grading them on transparency and on democracy. It's a great way to sort of call them out for their inaction and how little they've been doing, and maybe give them credit for the few things that they did do this year. So if you live near Capitol Hill and you want to come see that, feel free. It's July 30th at 1 p.m. And if you are going to talk to your legislator about signing the pledge or about any other issue, you should be prepared. Politicians, as you may know, are very, very, very good at bobbing and weaving and avoiding questions. And we've come up with a term for our state representatives who are very good at this, called legisplaining. So let's talk about how to counter legisplaining. When you go to call your representative, they're going to be a master at this, and you want to know how to respond. So the first thing you should know is that they might tell you they've co-sponsored a bill. Co-sponsoring bills isn't enough. It's sort of meaningless. Oftentimes they'll co-sponsor a bill and vote against it. That was mentioned in the pledge. They'll co-sponsor bills and then let it die in committee. So it's worth knowing that if your representative tells you, I've co-sponsored the bill you're asking me to support, ask them for a harder ask, because oftentimes that's meaningless. Here's a great meme about that is legislators sometimes see their job as just co-sponsor the bill and then do nothing else. And it's easy to do. You just have to click a button. There's no real process to it. It doesn't advance a bill in any real way. You should also know that policy changes, when they do pass, are often not done through a bill. They're not done through, so co-sponsoring a bill isn't the way to actually help policy pass, because policies aren't passed by individual bills. They're passed through these combinations of bills, through omnibus bills. So much like consolidating amendments, they combine bills. And so when a bunch of bills get assigned to a committee, they may combine those bills to another bill with a completely different number to make it as confusing as possible. And then they might give it to another committee, which produces another combination, other omnibus with another number. And then finally, the bill that passes through has another number and it has different language. And so they may have co-sponsored Bill Senate 33, but did they work to make sure that that bill made it into the combined bill. Did the language of that bill end up making it to the final omnibus bill that got passed? So the fact that omnibus is that so much of our actual legislating happens in these committees, combining bills and deciding whether or not to actually include the language, much like consolidated amendments leaves constituents out of the process. It makes it very easy for legislators on the phone when you're calling them to lie to you that they helped pass something by co-sponsoring the bill and by voting for the final omnibus that says it includes that, but does it actually? It's an important question to ask. So when you're talking to your legislator, know that oftentimes their co-sponsorship doesn't mean anything. Their recorded vote you might not have. Are you going to see their recorded vote in the committee? Sometimes maybe they use the timeout loophole. You don't know for sure. So how do you actually know whether your legislator supported something? You sort of don't. But there's things they can do. There's things that you can ask them to do to make it harder for them to lie to you and to get more productivity out of them. We'll talk about that later. But first, when you try to do that, they're going to derail the conversation. They're going to tell you that they're just so grateful that you're calling them. And they'll tell you about a bill they passed 20, 30 years ago. A lot of these people have been in office longer than I've been alive. They might talk about a completely different issue that they're super happy. We passed a great bill to address racial inequities in mental health care. Great that you did that. Doesn't have to do with what I'm calling you about. And oftentimes maybe that bill didn't actually do what they're saying. So just, do check in with yourself when you're calling your legislator. Are they talking about what you called them about? Or how long has this call been going on a different topic? And sometimes you're going to have to cut them off and recenter them onto the thing that you actually are trying to call them about. And they might say that they have no power about it. They're transferring responsibility. The committee I'm in actually tried to make this happen, but a different committee didn't. And because you can't see, because so much happens behind closed doors, you can't really verify whether they're telling you the truth on that. So it's important that they will often use the strategy of pushing the blame onto someone else who you can't vote out of power. They might tell you, oh, you're the only person calling me about this. They might tell you, oh, you're being mean to me right now by calling me. And that's not a good strategy. You should work with me, not against me. So you should keep in mind, is your legislator, as you call them, trying to act like this is someone else's problem? Because the reality is they represent you. This is a problem you're having as one of their constituents. This is their problem, and they should be doing things about it that are clear and visible and public. They'll tell you that it's never the right time. If you call them too early, it's too early in the process. Oh, I'm focused on the budget right now. Oh, it's budget season. I'm working on this other bill that's so important. It's the end of session. It's too late to get it in. Or if it's the beginning of session, it's too early. You have to wait. No matter when you call them, they're going to tell you it's the wrong time. Don't listen to them. Tell them this is a priority for me as one of your constituents. It should be a priority for you. So don't let them tell you it's not the right time, because you will call them back a year later and they'll tell you that you're too late. So it's always the right time. They're going to lie to you. They're going to lie. They're going to gaslight you. They're going to tell you that you don't know how a bill becomes a law. Let me explain how a bill becomes a law to you. You've attended this session. You know how a bill really becomes a law. So you can call them out when they do that. They'll tell you it's not a real issue. They'll tell you these things that you don't. It's important to keep in mind that you know what you're talking about. You know more about the state government than 99% of people just by attending this. So when they try to tell you you don't know what you're talking about, they might be lying to you. They might be using how the process officially works instead of how it actually works. So don't let them do that. Don't let them tell you you don't know what you're talking about. So to deflect it for any form of legislating they might do, there's 3 steps we talk about. Call it out explicitly. You're telling me that this is someone else's problem. You're telling me that this isn't the right time. You're telling me you need to talk to someone else about this. Then go big picture. But this is a priority for me. This is a priority for many of your constituents, and we know that whatever the issue, we know that we don't have public records in the legislature, and we know that that's a problem, and we want that fixed. And then finally, have a hard ask and repeat it at them until you get an answer, yes or no. So maybe it's ask them to write a letter to the speaker voicing your support. Maybe it's asking them to stand for roll call vote on the bill you're talking about. have a hard ask that isn't just co-sponsorship, something clear that can help the bill actually advance through the process, and repeat it at them until you get a yes or no. You can make a game of it. How many times do I have to ask this until they give me a yes or no answer on it? It may be a lot higher than you'll expect. So yeah, that's the very frustrating process of talking to legislators, and you have to take a training just to cut through their BS. So thank you for attending. And does anyone have any questions, or you can also feel free to stick around?
I have one question.
Yes.
My rep is Alice Pice in the 14th Norfolk District. And she's been in office for like 20 or 25 years. I think she's like the second in command in the House. How would one go about beating her in in a election?
Oh, like
Because
in primarying her?
yeah.
Well, that's a good question. You it's going to be that would be a very difficult task, but I suppose a worthy one. Being very involved in your community, going to all the Democratic town committee meetings, and being present is going to would be an important task. And
Hmm.
focus initially on trying to get her to do different things. She won't, but it'll help you build pressure, and develop a record of public times where there's public pressure from lots of different people asking her to take a particular vote, and then she doesn't. Um,
Hmm.
and then if repeatedly she doesn't, there's enough pressure on it. Work with organizations. If you're talking about running yourself, talk to Progressive Mass, talk to Mass Alliance, talk to Act on Mass. There are candidate trainings you can take that are very helpful,
Mm.
and make sure that you take those instead of just running directly. Yeah, as Travis Spence is pointing out, it's not an impossible task. It's doable. Evan Mackay, one of our endorsed candidates, will hopefully be beating a member of leadership this year. Um, it's doable. It's going to be a long and difficult process, but work with organizations. It'll make it a lot easier. And Karen, yes, the rules reform. They did in this last cycle make committee votes public, but there are lots of times where they have not followed that rule, which is what we highlighted earlier. They do so through a loophole of having a deadline where if the committee doesn't vote by that deadline, they don't have to vote at all. So there was no public committee vote on the State House Staff Union, and they often sometimes do it just by brazenly breaking the rule. There's a great website um, called beaconhilltracker.org where you can see where and when and how often they break their rules. Liz, that is a very interesting question. That might be more of a Scotia question. Scotia, do you know how much we get to know who the aides and staffs are in various offices?
Yeah. So this is one of the interesting secrets about the State House is it can be very hard to find out who works for your rep. Sometimes if you email your rep, their aide will respond. But in the Senate, they usually have multiple employees and it's not listed anywhere necessarily who works for which office. So I mean, I would recommend reaching out to your rep and usually their aide will respond or be CC'd on one of the emails, and then I always CC the aide whenever I email my reps. So it can actually help in your relationship with your legislator to also build up a relationship with their staff. But yeah, this can be a little bit of a tough question. It can be something to ask your representative about. Also, if there's an event in the district, sometimes their staff will go on their behalf, and then you meet them that way. There is a website where you can see, how much each staff member is paid, but it doesn't say which office they work for. Technically, all legislative staff serve leadership, and that's one way that they're also controlled by leadership, because leadership gets to decide how many staff you have. So we've seen cases where, a progressive makes a speech we're not expecting them to make against an amendment that we expected them to support, and then a week later they get an additional staff member assigned to them. And it's something that's very difficult to track because there's no kind of list of who works for what office. This was even made it hard for them to organize for the State House Staffers Union, I know, on the inside because, it's not listed anywhere. So I can share that link. But yeah, that's an interesting feature of working at the State House. They also didn't have an HR department until 2019. I mean, it's a
Can the
very
le
go ahead.
can the leadership limit uh, rep to 0 staff members, or is 1 like the minimum?
Everyone will have at least one. But try reading 82 pages in 24 hours and, filing 37 amendments and also taking constituent calls and all this stuff. It makes working with one is really tough. And if leadership's not a fan of you, they will make sure that you work with just one. In the
And
House side, almost
what's
all senators have, 4 to 5 staff.
what's the maximum a rep can have?
There are some, I mean, so committee staff, so staff that are assigned to particular issue areas, technically serve the House chair. So they could have, more than 10 staff that technically work for them. Again, it's sort of nebulous. It's not really clear who works for who.
And one more question. Sorry to ask so many questions, but in terms of, I know OCPF tracks like all the different contributions and stuff. Are you able to see like how much money a politician has in their like war chest, so to speak?
Yes, in their campaign accounts, you can see how much they have on hand by going to OCPF and finding their profile on there.
Okay, all right.
All right, are there any other questions?
Oh, I did want to highlight there was one from the chat.
Okay.
Someone asked, can youth get involved? And I wanted to highlight that we're doing organizing all the time this summer. We are supporting our endorsed candidates and also tabling in some of the key districts that we're targeting. So if you are interested, you don't have to be a youth, but if you are a youth, or if you're not a youth, and you're interested in coming out to table with us or canvas with us at some point.
Yeah, I'm not a youth, but I do have youth groups that are interested in learning more about the state house and politics and stuff like that. So I would be interested in bringing some of my youth so that they could see how it all works.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe can you send me an email? I'll send you my email in a private message.
Sure. My name is Asia.
Asia, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming
Nice
tonight.
to meet you.
I see one question, one raised hand.
I apologize if I missed this because I joined, it took me a little bit of time to connect as I was driving. When you mentioned about, assignment of staff and you talk about leadership, are we talking about the president and the Speaker of the House or anyone who lead a committee? Thank you.
So the Senate President, and we're generally talking about the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, and then their members, they have an official leadership team that usually includes like 10 to 12 members that get extra pay. And then so they're considered leadership, and then any committee chairs receive leadership pay. So there's various different levels, and the joke in Massachusetts is that 75% of people are paid like they're leaders. But generally we're referring to the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, and then the party leadership.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming out to this today. If anyone else has any other questions, you can feel free to stay and ask. But otherwise, I will be ending the call. Thank you, everyone.
This is all just so sad.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is sad.
It is sad, but we've seen change happen that I never thought we would get. So we know that, being an engaged constituent, telling your neighbors about what's going on, raising awareness, because, what do they say? Democracy dies in darkness, right? So, the more that we do to educate ourselves and be involved and be activated at the state level, the less they get away with. So, there's a light at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing
Thank
us
you
this.
for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you both.
Bye, everyone. Thank you all for coming out.
Night.
Have a good night.
Hey, how are you? I had one huge question, if you don't mind me asking.
No
Yeah.
worries.
This is incredible.